Sally opened the door and let us in. I haven't been in this house in years. I own a residential real estate company. As part of that business, I occasionally buy houses to rent out. I handle the rental business, and the cleaning and maintenance is handled by staging. After the purchase, I rarely, if ever, see my properties. The house had a nice atmosphere. A small foyer led to a large room. To the right was the study, followed by the kitchen and dining room. To the left was a hallway, presumably to the bedrooms. The previous tenant, Walter Bicknell, is indescribable. He's the strangest man I've ever met. Whenever I spoke to him, he was only half present, always staring off into space, perhaps literally. Maybe you'd believe him, but I never did. Walt called me out of the blue. This house was for rent, and I was asking a little more than the book was offering. I had potential tenants, but I didn't like them. Questionable credit rating. Walt wanted to rent this particular house, no other, and offered to pay $200 more than I was offering, an already too high rent. The offer intrigued me. I asked why, and regretted not asking. He told me that the previous tenant had won about $500,000 in the lottery. Walt then said that an alien told him that he too would win the lottery, and, to quote the alien, not because of his clairvoyance, but his transmogrification would occur as a result of living in this property. I don't believe in aliens. If aliens existed, they wouldn't use words like clairvoyance, transmogrification, and antecedent. I carefully went through all my experiences, trying to formulate a reasonable answer. Finding none, I asked, were there anal probes? I'm not talking about that. Will you take me up on my offer? I need to be in the house as soon as possible. Frankly, I had no idea what he, or his alien, was talking about. I told Walt that I had to talk to the other applicant first. I hung up the phone and looked it up. Sagacity, insightful wisdom, transmogrify, to transform in an amazing or magical way, and antecedent, preceding event or cause. In other words, moving into a house, not its talent, would magically transform it through winning the lottery. This idea seemed completely absurd to me. The guy hears voices. Is it even ethical to take his money? Being practical, I decided ethics had nothing to do with it. I'm not his doctor. I'm a potential landlord. So it doesn't matter if Puff the Magic Dragon whispers in his ear, as long as he pays his rent voluntarily on time. I decided to keep his information to myself. It wasn't in my best interest to let people know that I was taking extra money from a guy who talks to an ET. If everyone in the neighborhood got interested in some house with magical properties, it could backfire on me. Besides, I only had proof of the sesquipedalian's existence, not the real alien. And as I continued to look around the house, I was saddened. It was supposed to bring my wife and I some extra income. Worse, the phrase wife and I no longer applied. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to step back 2 weeks. April 5th. My name is Don Wilson, and I am 38 years old. I found out that my wife, with whom I have lived for 14 years, is leaving me. I was tipped off by a neighbor. I confronted her face to face, and she basically gave me the answer from the whore wife handbook. So what? It's just sex. If you do anything about it, I get the house, the kids, child support. She added an off-topic caveat. And I'll have to look for another partner, since presumably I'll lose you. I didn't say anything back. Having been hit, and with such indifference, what can I say? My wife, who I had built my life around, told me she was going to do what she wanted, and presumably lose me. Supposedly, goddamn supposedly. With nothing to say, I turned around, packed my suitcase for 2 days, and left. Confirming her feelings for me, she didn't say anything either. I was stunned. 14 years old, 2 kids, big plans, no apparent problems, and supposedly she's going to lose me. I drove on, following rather than directing the car. A motel appeared, and I pulled into it. It was small, but it had a restaurant attached to it. Next door was a shopping center with a liquor store. I was ready to go. I wasn't hungry, so I turned down dinner and opted for the liquor store. I looked at the scotch and decided to drink half a pint. It would be enough to get me to sleep and not too much to be in deep shit in the morning. A heartless whore wife, no dinner, and scotch is what a bad night is all about. Not even a phone call. I'm a successful guy in shape, making a nice bank, and supposedly, I haven't spent much time in my life unhappy, let alone depressed. I don't recommend it. 2 drinks later, full disclosure, each drink was half my bottle, and I was out. I didn't sleep well. The next day, while I was supposedly at work and my sons were at school, I went back to my former home and packed almost all of my clothes. I called work and told them I was taking the day off for today and Friday. I went back to my motel and had a late breakfast. A trip to the mall got me today's half pints of beer. I decided scotch would be drunk before and after dinner. Where did I fail? I tried to think about our life, but I couldn't keep a single thought in my head. Instead, I thought about whether I should start drinking early. If I did, I'd have enough time to buy another half pint. How was it that everything we were doing had been reduced to supposedly? I wallowed in self-pity, the day passed, and it was time to go to dinner, after the first drink. I remembered that. I can't tell you what I ate before I went back to my room for a second drink and to check my phone. I kept my phone, my channel of communication with the world, turned off. There were no calls from work. That was good. There was nothing at all, which made me even more depressed. I turned it off again and went to bed. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were like Groundhog Day. Repetition of despair, fighting the urge to choke on booze, inability to think, let alone think usefully, eating, buying half a pint of beer, drinking, eating, drinking, and sleeping. Monday came and I moved my first meal to an earlier time, went to work and stared at the computer. Quit time came, I went back to the motel, bought half a pint, etc. It was Wednesday. I was celebrating my 6th Groundhog Day when Walter Bicknell reappeared in my life. He came to the office and informed me that he was vacating my rental apartment, an even bigger disappointment. Walt was a great tenant. No noise, no complaints, from or about him, and he always paid his too high rent on time. He would smile, gleefully, and ask me, "Don't I want to know why?" The why question became the strangest, most impressive, and confusing moment of my life. It seems that Walt had won just over $26 million in the lottery on Saturday night. He handed me a check for 6 months' rent, said he would be leaving on the 21st, a week from Friday, and would let me know when he left. Maybe there really is some benevolent alien looking out for the people living in this house. I remembered that strange conversation and the almost mysterious way in which Walt had been informed of his impending victory. I still didn't believe it, but now how could I not? I could never think of an intelligent conversation with Walt. So, Walt, is the alien watching you or the house? He looked at me like I was an alien. What a strange thing to say. I have no idea what you're talking about. You offered to pay me more rent because the alien was going to guarantee you a lottery win if you lived in my house. Most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I didn't say anything like that. I'll call you when I vacate the apartment. Have a nice day. Curious and even more curious. Lewis Carroll. Alice in Wonderland. An alien spoke to him. He has to rent my house, he pays more, wins, and now claims he knows nothing. Perhaps he fears public scorn if he won with the help of aliens. Worse, he may fear that outrage over alien interference will negate his victory. Equally curious is the timing. I'm living in a hole-in-the-wall motel and need a place to live, and then he shows up, pays me a down payment on my rent, and moves out of my house. Walt's visit was like an alarm clock. I wasn't living, I was just waiting. Waiting for what? It's been a week since I packed up and left, and I still haven't done anything. Well, nothing is an understatement. I endlessly reviewed the life of a loser, myself, ignored my sons, and drank scotch daily. The next day, I went to my former home and sat down with my boys, 12-year-old John and 10-year-old Tim. I explained to them that I wouldn't be living with them for a while. John wanted to know why. Tim just cried. I told them that these things happen and we would all have to learn to deal with it. I got them settled and left. On Friday, I went back to my former home and decided I shouldn't go in again. I rang the doorbell. My wife answered, "Oh, is that how it's going to be? I want to see my boys and pack up the rest of my things." Without talking to me once? You don't have any feelings for me anymore? Elaine, you told me you were going to have fun and that you were supposedly going to lose me. I can confirm that you have lost me. My feelings were neither solicited nor engaged. She wrinkled her nose. Okay, I admit my words weren't the best. With that, dear Elaine, I disagree. You framed the question. Your words reflected your feelings. When I heard those words, I knew how you felt and removed myself. My comment stopped her. I saw her pull herself together, but what went through her head didn't stop there. She walked away, mimicking Scarlett O'Hara. I'll think about it tomorrow. Tomorrow will be another day. The words divorce proceedings didn't elicit any reaction from her. I wonder if the divorce filing would trigger her. The weekend was different from Groundhog Day, but not by much. I knew I'd be moving out of the hotel, so I bought my 5th bottle of good whiskey. I thought the blue label and plan would chase away the depression. It didn't. Of course, I had no plan. The scotch, depression, and lack of good sleep got in the way of that. People change. Sometimes change happens slowly and builds up over time. But change doesn't happen just like that. There must be something fundamentally wrong with me. These thoughts kept me on my toes. Logic was trying to take over. Logic said there was nothing wrong with me, but there was something wrong with her. But the emotional argument always defeated logic. Anyone who thinks logic can defeat emotion has never been married. Depression is a terrible thing. I was in a dark place. I was doubting everything. Something was wrong with me, and since I had no idea what, I suspected everything. I didn't want to approach customers. I didn't want to help employees. I was unhappy, and I wanted to wallow in that unhappiness. If anything, it was worse than Groundhog Day, when I was practically numb and unaware of anything. Now I was in pain, and I was overwhelmed by that pain. Wednesday was amazing. I got a call on my cell phone before I left for work. Walt was vacating the apartment by noon. I called the apartment company and talked to Sally Wilson. She would meet me at the house at 1 p.m. and let me in. Next chapter, April 19th. So, here I am looking around my rental property that has become my new home. Isn't it charming? Said Sally, going into rental agent mode. Sally, I'm sorry, that's rude. I'm here because I'm divorcing my wife, and charm has nothing to do with it. I'm sorry, do you need my help? Yes, but let me look around first. I apologize for being an ass. I knew there were good reasons to be lonely, she said with a smile. I smiled back. No big deal, nothing bad. The family room had a leather-like couch, chair, and recliner, a 60-inch flat screen on a stand, a couple tables and lamps. Looks like Walt subscribed to Nerdy Man Cave, a primitive edition, not a deluxe edition that used real leather, etc. Not bad for my purposes. The dining room was functional, nothing else special to say about it. The kitchen had been updated before Walt moved in, and it looked good. The master bedroom was vacated. The other 2 bedrooms were awful. I had 2 of the 3 essential items, a flat screen and a microwave. I needed a bed. Sally shook her head. Don, most of these things are pretty basic. That's fine for the moment. I need a new bedroom set for me and the 2 smaller bedrooms. How long will that take? Late tomorrow night. Do you want a nice bedroom? Sure, a typical one, the kind we use when we show a beautiful home. Modern, I don't want anything flashy. She paused to think, then said, By Friday. I remembered my conversation with Sally. Because I'm divorcing my wife. To divorce her, I had to go to a lawyer and do everything he does. I could have done it by leaving the house. I had a law firm that I used for most of our house sales. They must have a personal attorney on staff or know someone to recommend. I called the office as soon as I got back in the car. They had an attorney who handled divorces. I made an appointment for Friday morning. I went back to the hotel and told them I was checking out Friday morning. My new life required money. I went to bed early and hoped tomorrow would be a good day. Next chapter. I arrived early. I took 3 calls, all of which turned out to be advertisements for the sale of the company. I usually leave these calls up to the sellers, but this morning they were all out. There was no money today, but when these homes sold, the listing commission went to me. Things were off to a good start. I had a showing this afternoon. I had planned to turn it in, but thankfully didn't make it. Every once in a while, you get a break from working with clients. Too often, people looking for a home don't know what they want and can't afford what they find. The process is slow and leads to a lot of dead ends. My daytime client turned out to be the complete opposite. She was in her early 50s, her husband an executive at a large manufacturing firm with offices in a dozen cities. He had just transferred here and didn't have time to search. He had asked her to try to keep it under $1.5 million. The first house I showed her was one that I had personally put on the market for $1,750,000. She liked it, said it was perfect for them, and offered $1.5 million. 10 minutes later, a counteroffer came in for $1,700,000. She called her husband and he said, "Tell them $1,650,000 or no deal. Tell them we'll pay cash." The deal was done. My listing, my sale, 7%, $115,500 in my pocket. Not bad for 4 hours of work. There may have been better days in my life in real estate sales, but I don't recall one like this. I texted Elaine, "How about taking the boys for the weekend? I'll pick them up from school and drop them off around 6 p.m. Sunday." Not 5 minutes later, I received a text. "Sure, I'll pack a suitcase for them and pick them up on Friday." That was unexpected. No entreaties, no, "we need to talk." She didn't even know I had a house now. What happened to her? Where's her head at? And I knew the cupboards in the house were empty, so I went to the store after work and bought provisions. Women go grocery shopping, guys go frozen breakfasts, frozen dinners, hot dogs, buns, white bread, peanut butter, grape jelly, popcorn, lemonade, potato chips, nuts, scotch, and beer. Don't look at me like that. I didn't take you out to dinner. I was ready for Friday. Next chapter. While I was at work, doubts began to gnaw at me. I tried to keep busy so the doubts couldn't overwhelm me, but it was a losing battle. What could possibly be wrong with me that made her cast me aside so lightly? When I returned to the house, my thoughts had changed. There were no thoughts of loss. There was only what needed to be done next: mending relationships with my boys and learning how to pick the winning number in the lottery. The 2 bedrooms were cleared and prepared. The 3 of us would settle into my bedroom. I would offer them a choice of separate bedrooms or one combined bedroom and a luxurious game room. My new home was much smaller than their home with my mother, and I wanted to do everything I could to make it special for them. The lottery was quite different. There were actually 3 lotteries: the blue lottery, the gold lottery, and the combination lottery. The big prize was the combination lottery. People could buy a blue lottery ticket. The ticket had numbers from 1 to 30. 6 numbers were drawn on Friday night. The gold lottery was the same. It was drawn on Saturday. The combination lottery was drawn immediately afterward. It was unique. The combined lottery ticket had 2 sets of numbers from 1 to 30, 1 gold and 1 blue. There were 12 winning numbers drawn on Friday and Saturday. The 12 numbers, 6 blue and 6 gold, became the pool from which the 6 numbers were drawn. Who could have thought of such a strange system? Next chapter. Friday came. I stopped by the supposedly home and found the boy's suitcase. I met with the divorce attorney. I liked her. She would have the paperwork ready next week. I waited outside the boys' school along with 100 other cars. They got out together and, as if they had a beacon in my car, made their way to me through the maze of cars in a flash. "Hey, Dad, the coolest thing happened today in..." Simultaneously, son number 2. "Dad, guess what? Betty took my..." Whoa, that's it. One at a time. I have a surprise for you two, too. A surprise for teenagers is like a spotlight on the stage. Suddenly, we went from 3 talkers to 1. Tonight in my bedroom, we're going to have a camping trip. We're going to make plans and decide how to divide up the 2 rooms in my new house. You can take one each, or you can share 2 rooms. John, the oldest, immediately wanted his own room. Tim, the youngest, was bright for his age. He usually wanted what his brother didn't want and devised methods to get his way, since force wasn't a legitimate option. Sounds good, but what makes you think we want to share 2 rooms, Dad? We could designate one for sleeping and maybe homework, the other for games and entertainment. Can we have our own flat screen? Asked John, warmed by this new thought. Sure, but we'd have to arrange for sharing, or maybe we could buy 2 smaller ones. It didn't take a smartass to realize where that would lead. That would be so great. Let's do that. John was ready. Tim just smiled. I don't mind. Pushing his big brother at age 10. I made a quick mental note. Help him develop this skill or keep him from using it, especially towards me. The weekend went well in every way except the lottery. I didn't get to watch the combined drawing on Saturday. I don't believe people should buy lottery tickets. I couldn't watch the raffle and teach my boys that raffles are important. The Sunday paper informed me again that I had not picked any of the 6 winning numbers. April 24th. Sunday night, I had a good night's sleep. I got dressed and looked forward to the start of the week. I headed off to work. I still felt empty. Things were going phenomenally, but there was no way I could let go of the fact that I supposedly couldn't. A good marriage was over, and she still hadn't called me. Being successful in business was one thing, but I was still a failure. How could I be anything else? The day stretched slowly until I got back to the house. If I'm going to get rid of this malaise, it's time to find a companion. That's a strange euphemism. The last thing I needed was a companion. I wanted DC Tente. Wednesday after work, I walked into Themes, a bar-restaurant downtown. I looked around, trying to figure out why it was called Themes. After about 30 seconds, I decided I didn't care. I sat down at the bar. Next to me sat a very pretty girl in her early 30s. We quickly met eyes. I smiled and said, "Hi." Pretty smooth, right? She broke eye contact and looked at my left hand. I'm not here to talk to married men. The wedding ring was off, but the pale depression was still evident. I'm in the process of divorcing my unfaithful wife. I said this with some righteous indignation. Oh, that's original! She looked around the room. See those 2 sitting at the table? Yeah, are they waiting for a date? She laughed. I have no idea. Both are married, but will tell you they are in the process of divorce. The guy right behind them says his wife doesn't understand him. Personally, I don't understand why he thinks a single woman cares about his wife's cognitive abilities. She smiled, sure she'd given me a why, and held out her back to me. I was shocked. Not from her awareness of the room, but from the fact that my first attempt to meet a woman had ended with a hi. I was glad it didn't bother me too much. I rubbed her shoulder. She flinched and slowly turned around. I smiled, not giving up hope. If you don't mind, we seem to be a little ahead of the crowd. Can I ask you a question? You're not going to show yourself to be a tightwad, are you? Her face wasn't so pretty when it reflected disgust. Her statement made me laugh. No, we've already had our moment. I was wondering, since you seem to be a keen observer, who comes in here. What are they looking for? This startled her. I think the same thing as last week. She offered, but not so much as an answer, but to get me to say more. I've been married for 14 years and have been single for a few weeks now. This is my first time in Tima. I chose it because I heard the people here are friendly. She pondered my statement. Sometimes they are. Well, some of us are. Themes is a place of loners. I don't see many people coming here to find a new or even first spouse. We come in here after work, chat, have fun, and sometimes go home with a partner. Fun? It was clear from my facial expression and tone that it didn't sound like fun. Sorry, that's an estimate. That's not what I meant. Her back straightened slightly, and the expression on her face I couldn't read. You're not the most likely client here. Themes isn't my life. This is where I come after work on Wednesdays. It seems to be where people who just want to blow off steam after work come here. At least on Wednesdays. I guess you're right. She laughed musically. I know I'm right. About what exactly? It's a little early in my bachelor life to explore the hidden meanings that will be revealed in theme. We laughed. I offered her a drink to her endeavors. We chatted about single life. After the drink, I stood up. The place was filling up. We smiled and said goodbye. I didn't ask her name or offer mine. It was only 40 minutes, but I learned a lot about getting back to life. I found a spark, a feeling to hold on to. I told myself it wasn't the companionship I needed. The problem was that I didn't believe it. In those few minutes, I learned to be shallow, aggressive, and never alone. Next chapter. Less than a week after Elaine was sued, my attorney received her response. It was very brief, assuring her that her interests had not been violated and asking that a settlement conference be scheduled in 2 weeks. There was still no conversation between us. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I seemed indifferent, but surely there must be some emotion I was hiding from myself. If so, it's well hidden. How can there be such a thing? I don't know what most people would call places like Tima. I called them meat markets. I actually thought a good name for the bar would be dating market, but I suspect that's more suited to horny men than the general public. Meat markets are extremely efficient and effective. Some go there in search of a companion or partner, many as foreplay. The latter group can spot each other from 50 paces away. I found that I could go out 5 times a week, Sunday and Thursday were oddly slow nights, and get what I wanted. Guaranteed. With a one-night stand partner, it's simple. Thank you and see you soon. Optional. My relationship with the boys was impressive too. Their rooms fit together very well. The game room was 10x12 with two 43 inches screens in the corners on either side of the door. They also had laptops, tablets, phones, and controllers to control anything but a nuclear submarine. John sat in an office-type chair with a tray table across his arms. Tim had found a sack chair and was lying on it in poses accessible only to the littlest ones. They both wore headphones and enjoyed every minute they had to themselves. My only complaint? That I was wasting time and money on the lottery. It was confusing. It made no sense to me, and yet there were 2 winners in a row in the house. I did a lot of reading. The 3 draws made this lottery unique. People wrote about how to win. What I read said they didn't understand anything either. Next chapter. 2 weeks went by quickly. I went to the settlement conference with no idea what to expect. The meeting was in her attorney's office. He sat us down, gave us water coffee, and announced that Elaine preferred that he do the talking. I looked at her as I entered the room, and we both smiled meekly. When her lawyer told us that he would speak for her, I looked in her direction again, and she just nodded, confirming his words. I guess she's going to play it out all the way to the end. I recognized that would suit us just fine. Her attorney demanded primary custody, free visitation, and a 50-50 division of property. Child support and maintenance by formula. Since she didn't want anything extra, they assumed we would agree and the ordeal would end painlessly. My attorney asked about our house. She mumbled something about Elaine, and the kids would live there and I would pay for it. Elaine was suddenly different. Aggressive. That was the first emotion I saw from her. It occurred to me that my depression had come and gone. I didn't care that she was aggressive. Her problems were her problems. My attorney got things pointed in the right direction again, and we came to an agreement. The weeks flew by unnoticed. The notches on my pole increased accordingly. I had to change my lifestyle. June 13th. Life was good? No. Even better. Well, except for the lottery. Who knows? Maybe next week. Tomorrow's the day. It's the last day in court for my divorce petition. Since everything was agreed upon, I didn't need to attend, but I planned to do so anyway. I showed up at 9:55 and was surprised to see Elaine waiting for me at the door. "I'm sorry about this, Dawn," she said without remorse. "Me too," I said, realizing I sounded no more sincere than she did. We walked into the courtroom together and took our seats. Both lawyers appeared at the same time. From where? I had no idea. The judge walked in, said a few words, banged the gavel and said the divorce would be final in 90 days. I turned to my attorney and shook her hand. I looked at her, but Elaine had already left. Just like that, it was over. What an amazing transformation. A happily married man, then a barely functioning, depressed married man, a happy single guy wondering if perhaps I was tired of all the fun. I should be feeling remorse, but I couldn't find it. 10 weeks in, and there was nothing left of 14 years of marriage. Nothing, including any emotion on Elaine's part or mine. It had been a glorious day. Once outside, I wondered whether to go to the office or just enjoy the day. To my surprise, at least for me, I decided I wanted to go inside and rethink my lifestyle. There has to be some kind of limit, and in my humble opinion, I had reached it. As I sat down in my leather-covered chair, I began to contemplate the changes ahead. The joint custody agreement meant I would be home more often. Funny, it used to be home, and now it was suddenly home. Home is better when there are two parents. I had to make this my new priority. What do I do? What should I do? I didn't have to think long. Some of these come as foreplay. I knew how to recognize them. So, simple deduction. Ignore the ones you were looking for and focus on others. Stop being superficial. Start being yourself. No point in wasting time. I'd go tomorrow, after work. June 14th. I walked into Themes. I was hesitant to come here, since it's more of a loner's place. Oddly, I thought it would be easier to spot those looking for a partner. Behind the bar, in the same spot where I'd met the mystery woman when I'd first come here, sat a pretty red-headed girl who was definitely not a four-player. She looked as unkempt as anyone I'd seen during my many visits. I walked over and sat down next to her. She continued to stare straight ahead. I cleared my throat and said, "Excuse me." She looked but didn't smile, her gaze darting around as if she was looking for an alternate exit. "I apologize, but you look like you don't want to be here." She hummed, maybe trying to laugh. "Is it really that obvious?" "That would be rude of me. You know what? There's a coffee shop across the street. Why don't we go there? At least it's quiet there." "I don't even know you." I smiled, reached into my shirt pocket, pulled out a business card, and handed it to her. "Don Wilson, Responsive Realty. Now you know me at least well enough to cross the street." Her eyes flashed. "Oh my goodness! We bought the house from you, well, from Donna Townsend." "Donna is one of my best." "We?" I asked without taking my eyes off my work. "My husband, ex-husband, and me. The house is ex, too. We got it in the divorce." "And you?" "Grace Baldwin. When we worked with Donna, it was Mr. and Mrs. Jack Wyndham." "Well, Grace, you shouldn't be here. We have a bit of a past in common. It's safe to cross the street. I suggest you take your chances." She did. I shared my story and she relaxed. A similar situation, I thought. She sighed. "Jack and I were married for 6 years. We divorced almost 2 years ago. We were going to have our first child when I was 30. I'm 32 now. But there was no way the time was right for him. One day he told me he wanted a divorce because he had fallen in love with another woman. It turned out it was his secretary who was pregnant." "I'm surprised you're still single." "To tell you the truth, I've been asked out on dates, but I've only gone on 2. I was in love and he left me for, well, for much less if I may say so. It shocked me. There must be something wrong with me." I smiled. Like when your wife said she was planning to have lovers and supposedly lost you. That was the first smile I saw from her. I swore I'd make time to see more of them. Then she made a thoughtful look and said, "You know, how long did it take you to get over it?" Surprisingly, I was thinking about it today. I was depressed for a couple weeks and then, amazingly, things started to change. The first night of that change, I was sitting right here, well right here in Tima, in the same spot, I said, pointing back across the street. A lively conversation ensued. She offered, "My friends keep telling me I should leave the house, and I still don't leave. But when I drove by here tonight, I had a feeling that I should go in. When I got there, I couldn't figure out why." I bit my tongue to keep from saying, "Gee, how you got out of it, who would have thought?" Instead, I said, "The why is my luck. I've had a lot of it lately." "The fact that I decided to give up tonight has to do with your luck?" She half smiled. "You're here and it's my luck, and you say it isn't?" We talked and joked and generally enjoyed each other's company. I looked at my watch. It was approaching 7:30 p.m. "Why don't we go out to dinner?" "Oh, that would be great. I'm starving. I just haven't had time to think about it." There were 3 pretty good places within walking distance. I called 2. The first didn't have any tables available, but the second one would accommodate us right away. As we walked, I asked her out for Saturday night, and she accepted. We were at the restaurant 5 minutes after the call. "Are you working?" I realized that I was doing most of the talking. I'm good at it. I feel at ease around people and find I can put them at ease. Grace needed to be reassured. "I'm working. I run a group that develops drugs to help people suffering from age-related changes." "What kind of education do you have?" "I have an advanced degree in biochemistry and gerontology." "Wow, you seem to be—" "Stop it, Buster. I'm just an ordinary girl." She said this with great force, then stopped talking and said, "One of the demons who visits me regularly says hubby left with the secretary because I was too smart." I hit a nerve. "I'm sorry," I said seriously. "I just wanted to say that you're impressive. I like impressive things. I know those demons, though." I paused. I needed to say more. "People are different, you know. I'm curious. I like to learn. I don't consider myself the smartest person in the room. I'm someone who likes to get to know people and help them. That's why I'm in sales, and if I may be so immodest, I'm damn good at it." This prompted another conversation. I asked her about how she became interested in something so technical. I was mesmerized by her answers. The more curious I became, the more she wanted to tell me about herself. I had never met anyone like her. We looked at each other. Our conversation was lively. We had fun getting to know each other. I watched her come alive. She was obviously enjoying it, and not having been with anyone in a while, she felt free to express herself. "Excuse me, sir." I looked up at our waiter. "We close at 11 o'clock." I looked around the room. There was no one else in the restaurant. I looked at my watch. 11:33. "Oh, excuse me." I reached into my pocket and handed him another 20. "We've obviously lost track of time." Next chapter. Friday was the blue lottery drawing. Nothing. The lottery was confusing. I drew the boys' birthdays and my birthday in both colors. That meant I was to get 3 numbers in Friday's drawing and another 3 numbers in Saturday's drawing. The 6 winning numbers from the Friday and Saturday drawings were then placed in a drum, and 6 numbers were drawn from them to determine the winner. Even if you had 6 numbers in the drum, the odds of winning the drawing were 1 in 1,000. But blind faith makes you do stupid things. Maybe there were aliens. Maybe they were watching me. Maybe. Next chapter. Then Saturday came. I was going on a date. I was beginning my search for a partner with whom I could share my life. This was so different from recent nights. I picked Grace up. She looked different. "What?" She was curious. "You look different, and I can't tell you why." "The same way you do." I didn't dress to attract you, I dressed to attract someone attracted to me and vice versa. Her answer made me smile. I pondered on this and then she said, "Hello? Where did you go?" It took me 20 minutes to get dressed because I couldn't decide what to wear. I couldn't decide because I couldn't understand what you just said, without even thinking about it. She laughed heartily. It took me 90 minutes to get dressed. Stop whining. It was a wonderful evening. When I dated Lainey, I was young and didn't know much. I was trying to pick the perfect woman for me, before I knew myself. I also had no idea who the perfect woman was. Grace and I struck up an easy conversation, and in a couple hours we learned more about each other than I knew about most people. Grace, that was a wonderful evening. Could we do it again? Maybe Monday night? Oh, that would be great, but Monday isn't suitable. How about another night? Tuesday? Great. I drove her home, kissed her goodnight, promising much, and headed back to the house. I'd never met anyone quite like her. So much intelligence, yet down to earth and witty. I thought, this can't be right. You can't look for a life partner and find her right away, right? I had to laugh at myself. I found no one but the woman I wanted to get to know better. June 30th. Grace and I met 4 times in 9 days. The 4th time, we made plans for me to spend the night at her apartment. We couldn't wait to make love, and oddly enough, we had already discussed how and when. It was all very scientific. Unfortunately, the equipment below the belt isn't very scientific. We barely had time to eat dinner before we were at her house, ripping each other's clothes off. It was beautiful. Sometime during the night, we swore fidelity to each other. Both of us said it was especially important to us before our past partners betrayed us, and even more important now. During the discussion, I laughed. "What are you laughing at, Dawn? I know you well enough that you don't take what we say lightly. So why laugh?" "Grace, about a week ago we didn't know each other. You were so timid, you couldn't even stick your finger in the water. I was trying to get my confidence back. Now we know each other well. I dare say I know you better than I ever knew Elaine. It's just ironic." What made me laugh was her concern. "Dawn, I want to talk to you. Bring us some wine, please." It was an odd time to talk, but if she wanted to chat, I was ready. I brought 2 glasses of the red she preferred, and she was already lying in bed in her robe, ready to talk. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I understand your laughter at the irony, but it hit me in a different way. I work all day, every day, trying this and that, experimenting to find the combination of chemicals that will have the desired effect. It's never perfect the first time. How did we do it the first time? Could it be? I've thought about it, but not seriously. How could aliens be serious? Grace, I'm sorry. This is a little weird, but it's true, and I know I have to tell you." I told about the 2 tenants and their lottery winnings, the affirmation and then denial of the existence of helpful aliens, and how my mood changed when I entered the house. I went on to describe what my next steps were in terms of correspondence. Maybe there are times now where hooking up is easier than in the past, but no one is as lucky as I was. Then I decided I wanted to find a life partner, and I found her right where I started my ego rebuilding. How is that possible? Now she was smiling. What a wonderful story. I grinned and said, "Well, not so marvelous. I bought all those tickets and haven't won the lottery yet." She fake frowned. "You could be a little more romantic." It hit me. How did I not notice that? I won the lottery. Against tremendous odds, I drew the only winner. She took off her robe. I discovered it was all she was wearing. "That's better. Come get your prize. It's given out in installments." Once again, the lovemaking was beautiful. As we drifted into sleep, I murmured, "I'll save a fortune by not buying those stupid lottery tickets." That elicited a contented cooing, and we fell asleep. Next chapter. The subject came up from time to time. How could it not? Our beliefs were similar. It was too coincidental to ignore, and there was no way it could be anything other than coincidence. We liked Star Wars as much as anyone else, but the possibility that the Skywalkers were using the Force on our behalf didn't merit serious discussion. The following 4th of July weekend, Grace and I were trying to decide how we should introduce her to the boys. We both agreed that since my divorce wasn't final, whatever we were going to do should be over before they went to bed. We decided to spend the day at the house, barbecue, etc. Planning a family event with a scientist is different than planning with a home seller. She was concerned with the details, while I was unaware of the existence of details. But we met each other's needs, and her introduction to the boys took place. July 4th. Grace knocked on the door and John answered. Tim and I kept up. Hello, my name is Grace and you must be John. He extended his hand for a shake and said politely, It's a pleasure to meet you. Tim said, Hi, too, and we all sat down in the living room. Boys, I wanted you to have a chance to get to know Grace and for her to get to know you. You know we talked about all this last night, but the first thing we want to do is just hang out and get to know each other a little. Are you going to take my mommy's place? Asked Tim, his tone at least curious rather than threatening. Grace stood up, walked over to where Tim was sitting and knelt down to be face to face with him. No, Tim, it isn't. But it's the most important question you could ask. Your mom is your mom. No one can replace her. But I think you might be interested in learning about Dad and me. Am I right? Tim only nodded. Well, we don't know right now. We'll get to know each other better, and in a few months maybe we'll be able to say whether we'll be a couple for a long time or not. But right now we're just seeing who we are. Are you going to live here? Asked John. He was standing almost behind her, on the couch next to me. She turned and replied, No, definitely not. I have my own condo, and I sleep there every night. Does your dad sleep there with you? John, this is a little personal. I think you feel threatened by Grace, is that right? Well, yes, I want you and Mom to be together again. I want things to be like they were before. Grace remained in her seat, but the question was obviously directed at me. John, I'm sorry you have to deal with this at such a young age. I turned to Tim. And you at an even younger age. Sometimes marriages fall apart and can't be repaired. I wish things were different, but they aren't. Your mom and I spent wonderful years together. We have 2 wonderful sons that we both adore, but we won't be together as a family anymore. We all fell silent. Grace decided to break the silence. John, your father and I, wanted all 4 of us together at the beginning of our relationship. I've only known your father for 16 days. We like each other very much. But if we want them to develop, it's important to all 4 of us that you and your brother get to know me and hopefully like me. John squinted, looking at her, and honestly, it made me a little nervous. Apparently, he was sizing her up. The squint was replaced with a smile. I like that. I can tell you're serious about what you're saying. You want me to like you? Grace must have been tired of kneeling. She was wearing shorts and sandals, and I bet the carpet was starting to bore her. She lowered herself onto one hip, tucking her heels behind her, and continued to look John straight in the eye. You make me very happy, John. I want you to have a chance to get to know me. She turned and looked at Tim. The same goes for you, Tim. I looked at my watch exaggeratedly carefully. Gee, it's noon. How about some grilled hamburgers and corn on the cob? That was the end of the introductions, and we continued on with our day. Next chapter. It was a strange novel, I thought. Weird in the sense that we both realized how quickly we had found a spark after being in so much pain. We both wanted to avoid that kind of pain more than we wanted to find romance. Often we joked that we were brought together by Martians, so it was okay. We laughed, but it was like I was buying lottery tickets. I didn't believe it was true, but why not buy them? Just in case. Dawn, this is weird. We joke that some kind of alien intervention brought us together. It all seems ridiculous to me. And yet, When I wonder if things are happening too fast, that ridiculous thought comes to mind and brings me comfort. I'm the same way. What amuses me is that I've stopped buying lottery tickets because I figure we're my prize. I smiled warmly, but she knew I wasn't flirting with her. I was telling my truth. Neither of us believed it, but September 9th. Time had run its course. We were real. Neither of us doubted it. We started talking about when we would get married, even before I proposed to her. During that first conversation, I told her that I had to propose to her and that she would get it soon. I gave her a surprise ring the next time we were together. She liked the ring, and we agreed that she would not wear it until September 16th when the divorce was final. We spent more and more time together. We often involved the boys. That relationship was growing too. Surprisingly, Elaine either didn't notice it or didn't care. She and Grace met a couple times when we brought the boys back to or from my former home, and Elaine was as friendly as if she had been introduced to a stranger at the grocery store. And then, "Hi, Tim. How are you?" "Mom died." He almost screamed. "Wow, what happened?" "She's lying at the bottom of the stairs. She's just lying there." "Tim, touch her face. Is it warm?" "Yes, it's hot." "Good, she's just unconscious. I'm going to go get help. You stay by the phone and wait for the call, okay?" We disconnected and I ran to my car, dialing 911 as I went. I told them what I knew and asked them to call Tim and tell him if he needed to do anything. I warned that he was only 10 years old, but he seemed to be holding his own. By the time I was done with the emergency call, I was on my way to Elaine's. Too fast. It was amazing that I made it in time. What amazed me even more was that I arrived a few minutes after the ambulance. The front door was open and two medics were rolling a stretcher toward the house. I walked through the door and there was another medic kneeling beside Elaine and shouting her name. There was medical paraphernalia all around her. It looked like he had given her an injection and was preparing to give her CPR. "Tim, where are you, buddy?" I asked him to wait in that room. The EMT pointed to the family room door. At the same time, Tim ran up to me. I picked him up and hugged him like he was a 4 or 5-year-old boy. "It's okay." I looked over, and the ER doctor was gently shaking Elaine's hand. He kept calling her name. Suddenly, she coughed and tried to open her eyes. I couldn't tell if she opened them, but then the other EMTs came over and the three of them moved her onto a stretcher, lifted her up, and started rolling her toward the ambulance. "What hospital?" I asked. "County." "Is she okay?" "I think she's going to make it." With those words, they got into the ambulance and headed off. End of part 1. Part the 2nd of May be coming out in 12 hours. Write in the comments if you're waiting for it. Also, give a like under this video and subscribe to my channel. I hope you enjoyed this video.